Welcome back to the Cleveland Baseball Talk podcast. I'm Joe Noga, joined by Paul Hoynes. Hoynesy, the Guardians get it done. They win the series against the Marlins, 9-4. The final on Thursday night. They take the game after falling behind again in the first inning by 3. They sort of drew a line in the sand and said, not here, not now. They came back 3 runs of their own against Edward Cabrera in that first inning. But really, it was Jose Ramírez, sort of the spark again. It never gets old talking about Jose climbing up the all-time lists and charts in Guardians franchise history. He did it again on Thursday, passing Kenny Lofton for third place, all to himself on the club's all-time runs scored list. He's behind now Tris Speaker and Earl Averill, and both of those guys within the next maybe year or two, if he stays on this trajectory, he's going to have the most runs scored in franchise history. Just the all-around game out of Jose Ramírez yesterday, particularly his excellence on the bases, really stood out.
So, when you pass Kenny Lofton in runs scored, you're doing something right. I mean, Lofton was like one of the most dynamic players I've ever seen. And when Jose passes him, especially, in a speed category or in a run production category, you're watching something special. And you're right, Joe. I mean, he had 3 hits last night, 2 stolen bases, 3 runs scored. Just he scores on the contact play from third base. Just I hope people realize that what they're watching here is not normal. This is something special, and we get to watch it day in and day out. And for the last 10 years, we've got to watch it.
Man, I was at pretty much the entire Cavaliers run between 2015 and 2018 when LeBron was out there. And I covered a lot of those games as well. And you knew, you were seeing something special, something great. You're still seeing it going on when it was happening. What's the quote from The Office when Andy says, "I wish there was a way you knew you were in the good old days when they were going on"? I think you got to take into account, you got to appreciate what Jose's able to do right now. And like you said, the contact play. Let's go back to that because Austin Hedges and Stephen Vogt both mentioned in the post-game interviews about how really I asked Stephen Vogt, how many guys score on plays like that? And Vogt looked at me and he said 1. And he goes, "Oh, no, there's a lot of really good base runners in baseball. I don't want to take anything away from them, but Jose's one of one." And really, ground ball by C.J. Kifus in the 7th inning up the middle. And it almost looked like Ramírez was down the line before the ball made contact with the bat. He gets good reads, he's got great instincts, and then, once he goes, he's as fast as anybody on the bases, sliding in ahead of the tag. It was just really one of those plays where, even if they reviewed it, there's no chance that he was going to be out.
Yeah, he accelerates so fast, Joe. It looks like 2 or 3 steps he's at top speed, and just really great instincts. And you're right. I was watching the replay of that, and he was halfway down the third baseline. I don't think I think Rick Manning said it on TV. Unless that ball was hit right at Miami shortstop, they're not throwing him out. I mean, you just can't. And the catcher was trying to block the plate, and Jose was pointing to the umpire saying, he can't do that. But that didn't matter anyways because he had scored. But really, really a great play. That lots of people hate the contact play. They say it never works. Well, it never works because you don't have a guy on third base that runs like Jose Ramírez.
Well, and just to highlight how special and how unique what he does is we watched the end of the Twins and Tigers game later on when we got back to the press box, and that was in the 11th inning. The automatic runner was at third base, and they had a check swing bouncer to the first baseman. The Twins did. It was the winning run in the bottom of the 11th. They had a chance to walk off right there. It was Alan Roden, who doesn't have the experience or instincts that Jose Ramírez has. He was at third base. He tried to score on the check swing bouncer to first. Spencer Torkelson threw him out. I just realized watching it, I said, look at his first movement. His arm does something funny, and instead of putting it in gear and getting down the line, you compare that to what Ramírez did. Ramírez was practically across the plate at the same amount of time that it took Roden to get things going. So That's the reason why the Twins lost. That's the reason why the Tigers won that game and were able to stay 6.5 games in front of the Guardians for first place in the American League Central. We'll get to the playoff implications of all that here in a minute. I just want to wrap up, Ramirez and get back to, talking about him climbing all these lists. You talked about, you're doing something right when you pass Kenny Lofton in a speed category. Well, you probably do the same, say the same about Omar Vizquel, probably one of the better base runners that you've covered in your career, your time covering Cleveland baseball. Jose Ramirez, 2 stolen bases last night, stands two steals away from passing Omar, who's got 279 steals for Cleveland, that he could be in second place behind Lofton. Now Lofton's got 452 steals. I don't know if Jose will ever get that many, but I think Lofton's record probably seems safe. But you and I were talking. That's a ridiculous amount of steals to try and get.
Yeah, I mean, Kenny, those were. I would love to see Kenny in this era right now, where you the 2 throwovers. I mean, I think his career high was 77 stolen bases in 1 year.
Mhm.
Some crazy number like that. When it's when pitchers and teams really didn't pay a lot of attention to the stolen base, they really didn't stop it before the slide step and everything. But nowadays, with the minimum of, or the only you can only step off or throw over twice. Kenny would be off and running, but Jose, I mean, he's closing in on another 40 stolen base season, Joe. I mean,
And
I'm not sure how
he could
many.
lead the league. He's
Yeah,
tied for the major league lead right now at 35.
and he's 32 years old, so that tells you something about how he's taking care of his body and just his instincts, and he hasn't lost a step.
Well, Kenny Lofton was 29 years old in 1996 when he set his career high, led the majors with 75 steals that year. But you're right, Kenny Lofton running in this day and age would be a sight to behold. Not only, they have extra bigger bases. I mean, you talk
Yeah.
about the fractions of inches. Even if a catcher were able to get a good throw off, it's closer now for Lofton to steal a base. You're right. I remember with Kenny was just the boldness and the daring of his leadoffs. He would get twice as big a leadoff as anybody else, just knowing that he could get back or take off for second base if you threw over.
Yeah, he was really fun to watch, and he loved it too. That was his game. And during when he came to Cleveland, his first 6, 7, 8 years in Cleveland, you couldn't stop him. I mean, he ran wild, and then he got a little upset because the home run hitters were getting all the money, and then the stolen base guys were getting passed. He thought his game wasn't being appreciated. But if you look at down through I mean, I don't know how many bases he stole. I know he was, for a long time, he was the leader in postseason steals. So just this is a guy that was born to run.
622 career steals, 452 of them with Cleveland for Kenny Lofton, a guy who should be in the Hall of Fame without question in my mind. I think every Gen X Cleveland baseball fan had that Kenny Lofton poster that said 90 feet, and it gave all the metrics about how long it took Kenny Lofton, how many steps and how many seconds it took Lofton to take second base. So, a lot of really good memories there. We mentioned the standings right now. The Guardians stayed 6.5 games back of the Tigers in the American League Central race because they were able to win an extra innings in Minnesota. But with the Yankees being off, the Guardians were able to cut the deficit for the third wild card spot to a half game. If the Yankees lose tonight and the Guardians win tonight, the Guardians will be in a playoff position for the first time in a while.
Yeah, they have kept the pressure on the Yankees. They've moved up through that wild card swamp. I think 3, 4, 5 weeks ago they were about 4.5 out with 5 teams in front of them, and those weren't even the 3 wild card teams. So they've on this hot streak that they've been on, they've really kind of navigated some traffic, and they're knocking on the door right now, Joe.
Yeah, one of the reasons for that, the starting pitching, last night's starting pitcher, Tanner Bybee, doesn't really get, I think lately he hasn't been going as deep as he would like to in some games. He did go 5 2/3 or 4 2/3. No,
5 2/3 last night.
He did go 5 2/3 innings last night before walking a batter, and they called for Eric Sabrowski to come in and finish off the sixth inning for him. But the way things started off, it looked like Bobby was falling into that unlucky category again. An infield hit, some poor defense behind him, and Austin Hedges makes an error on dropping a ball on a play where they had a runner dead to rights at home, allows 2 runs to score. It looked like the wheels could have fallen off the cart for Bybee at that point, but he corrected things and got as deep as he did into the game. Just, what are you seeing out of Bybee lately that gives you hope that he can, sort of maintain this moving forward?
He's what? He's 5-0 in his five. He's won 5 straight decisions. I think the ball club, the Guardians, are 7-0 in his last 7 starts. So, he's doing something right in that regard. But from your ace, you would like to see him throw fewer pitches. Don't work so hard early in the game and get a little deeper into the ball game. Get into the sixth, into the seventh inning. They need that. The other the 4/5 of the rotation are doing that, but Bobby seems to, he has trouble getting past that fifth inning. They're, getting, through the sixth inning, I should say. But he's one of those pitchers where, the wins are coming his way this season. And what is he, 9-9 right now? I
Yeah, he
think.
evened his record at 9-9. Yeah.
So, he's getting decisions one way or the other, but you would like to see him, pitch a little better early in the game. It seems like he always has that one bad inning, or that one tough inning, and it comes early.
And Stephen Vogt said, he was asked, pregame about Bybee, and he said nobody in baseball gets to 0-2 on a batter faster than Tanner Bybee. And I sort of was asking the Guardians baseball information staff, is there a stat that we can hone in on to a way to quantify what Vogt said, to see if indeed, Bybee gets to 2 strikes, faster or more often than anybody else. They said it'd be kind of hard to measure that specifically, but I just think, you look up and he's 0-2 in the count against a lot of guys, and then before you know it, it's 3-2, and he's given up a hit or a walk, or just not being able to finish off a batter. And it's not that he doesn't have the pitch arsenal to do it. He's got every pitch that you need to be able to finish a batter off that way. You and I were talking before we started recording here about Shane Bieber, and how after a year or two in the league, Shane Bieber had that ability to finish off a batter in 3.5 pitches. He had the ability to finish off an inning in 10 pitches or less. And it was not just an ability, but he was consistently doing it. And that's what made him so good. I think that's the next step in the evolution for Tanner Bybee, is to not just be efficient, but be ultra efficient like that. And that's the separator between being a good starting pitcher and being a great one.
Yeah, and Bieber had such good control. Even in the minor leagues, he hardly walked anybody. I mean, this is a guy that, just pounded the strike zone. And, Bybee's probably a little different pitcher, obviously, but he's going to have to learn to throw fewer pitches, to throw more quality strikes, and to stay in the strike zone without getting hit.
Yeah, and even if they do put the bat on the ball, you're getting weak contact, you're getting flyouts, groundouts, and those save your arm, those save your pitches and your pitch count, and you can get a little deeper. All right, want to talk about one of our favorite guys, Austin Hedges, last night. I wrote this morning about the walk-up music maybe changing for him. Big My Chemical Romance fan, Hoynes, is that was Cal Quantrill's warm-up song. That Austin Hedges sort of wanted to sort of give him a wink and a nod as he stepped up to the plate, and it wound up working. Hedges with 2 hits for the first time in almost a year last night. He gets an RBI on a sac fly in the 7th, and fans chanting his name as he steps up to the plate. He threw out a runner on the bases. It was a good night to be Austin Hedges at the ballpark last night for Hedgie.
Yeah, you got to really like Hedges. Just, what he brings, the energy he brings. And then he has a night like that, long overdue. This guy, has never claimed to be Johnny Bench as a catcher, a very good defensive catcher. Offensively, he's still looking for it. But to have a night like that, a single in the 2nd inning, double in the sixth inning, and then the sacrifice fly in the 4-run. A good night all the way around. He throws a guy out at the plate, and he's just, you never see him down, Joe. You never see him. He's always 100% positive that way. You never see him really down in the dumps, or he's down on the ball club, down on himself. It's always, looking forward and, helping the pitcher. And, he's so, so positive. When you talk to him, he goes, we're trying to win the World Series. We want to bring a World Series to Cleveland. I mean, and not too many people would say that, just kind of put their neck on the line here and just come out and say that. It hasn't happened since 1948. There's a lot of people still waiting for that.
Yeah, Hedges, I guess it's sort of trying to speak it into existence every time you talk to him. He mentions it. So you're right. You set your goals high, but you're right, that infectious personality. And again, you're playing baseball, you're playing professional baseball. Personality only goes, I think, the talent has to be there. And obviously, he's an elite backstop. He's an elite game caller, pitch framer, blocker. He can throw guys out on the bases with anybody. But Stephen Vogt said before the game, or I'm sorry, Stephen Vogt, in his post game, he said, it's great to see the work that Hedges has been doing pregame, trying to hit, just even fastball changeup. He was out there hitting off the machine yesterday early. And Vogt said to see that translate into a couple of hits for him, that's a positive step. And it's something, they're not relying on this guy to hit 300 down the stretch, but any offensive contribution they can get out of him would be a welcome change.
Yeah, because, they really haven't gotten much pop at all out of the catching position. Naylor has struggled. Hedges is what he is. If he could contribute a little bit more on the offensive end, that would be, that would be welcome. But, obviously his game is defense and running the pitching staff.
All right, before we get going, wanted to mention the Ohio Casino Gaming Commission. What have you found out on the latest developments in the investigation into Luis Ortiz and Emmanuel Clase?
Yeah, the commission, Joe, the other day said that they had been tipped off on June 30th by an Ohio sports book that there were some irregular betting activities surrounding the Guardians pitchers, Emmanuel Clase and Luis Ortiz. They immediately opened an investigation of their own, and then were almost simultaneously contacted by MLB. So they're conducting their own investigation on the Guardians, but they're also working with MLB to, try to uncover this and see what the extent of this gambling scandal is involving Clase and Ortiz. Right now, MLB has the deadline August 3rd. I don't think there's a deadline on the commission's investigation. So we'll have to see just what, where these two investigations lead, and, what are the consequences, Joe? What can, I haven't been able to talk to the Ohio Commission people about what kind of teeth do they have? What if they find wrongdoing? What can they do?
Is it unusual for a sports book to report that sort of activity, or is that something that's a normal occurrence for the commission to receive reports like that?
I think it's since gambling became legal in Ohio, Joe, in 2023. I think it's required. There are certain sports books that work for the commission, just like there's certain sports books that have a relationship with MLB, and they will contact the league or the commission if they see irregularities.
Yeah, and algorithms and computer programs are probably used to sort of track surges in betting in that regard, and it's probably pretty hard for those players to avoid detection if they just think that they're able to go out there and do it out in the open and not have red flags go off.
Yeah, it's not like 50 years ago or 40 years ago where you called your bookie and no one, on some dark, down the alley somewhere, and two knocks on the door and said, put 50 on this guy, or so, something like that. There's evidence now. It's all this evidence is accumulating, and I think that's what these guys didn't realize. I mean, every if there's irregularities, they're going to show up, and if you're connected with it, you're in trouble.
Yeah, I'm going to defer to somebody else on, contacting a bookie. That was never something that I ever had any interest in. So,
My dad
like,
did.
okay, well, there you go. All right. Yeah. As far as, what teeth they have or what enforcement they have, we've talked about, the potential for them to hand off
Yeah,
to federal agencies in terms of the charges there.
right. They could be felonies. They could, I'm not sure what they can impose, but they can hand it off to law enforcement agencies. Joe, if the Ohio Commission, the Casino Commission is looking into these things, MLB is looking into these things. There's got to be some more federal agencies that are probably doing the same thing here. So this is really going to be interesting to see if when it comes out, what happens, just how widespread this is.
Yeah, and how again, you said the August 31st deadline, but don't be surprised if things maybe even go beyond that because they want to make sure, like we said before, if you're going to impose the harshest of penalties, then you're going to want to make sure you have all of your T's crossed and I's dotted before you do that.
And then you've
All right,
got,
Hoynes.
the Players Association, they can file a grievance, so we've got that's a whole nother chapter.
All right, Hoynesy, we'll check in with you again next week on the Cleveland Baseball Talk podcast.
Right.